what does when you hear inspire and develop the builders of tomorrow, what is something that comes to mind that's unspoken about that sentence?
Is this a test? Because I think I'm gonna fail. I don't know why. I'm just
Well, I'm going to ask you first, and then I'll share what I think. But yeah, what comes to mind unspoken about that statement that's maybe implied but not implicit?
kids,
Well, certainly,
toy.
right? I mean, that could be, builders of tomorrow suggests a focus towards children, although not exclusively. I'm hearing accessibility, and
Hmm.
that I think kind of complements what you were just saying about, if your mission was only the best is good enough, now you're going to have to speak to exclusivity, higher price points, all sorts of things. But no, their mission is inspire and develop builders of tomorrow, which means that whatever they're doing needs to be generally accessible to a large group of people.
Hello, bricks, chicks, and minifigures. You are listening to AFOLs Welcome, where we talk about all things Lego from the perspective of two adult collectors. We're your co-host. I'm Grinch,
And I'm West.
and today we are getting ethical with Lego. But before we do that, West, I've got to know, how was your week? Let's banter over some bricks.
Well, Grinch, it's been a pretty quiet week here, as the astute listener has probably already figured out. I'm going through a bit of the early spring crud at the moment, so working through some of that. But specifically on the Lego front, news from the West household is I bought the cactus, the blossoming cactus botanical set. It was at Costco, so always a great deal on those botanicals at Costco. It should be there at local Costco's, obviously, depending on the region and everything. Supplies and whatnot, it may or may not be available at your Costco, but if it is a set you're looking to buy, or you need an excuse to go buy, here's your excuse.
Well, I'm sorry that you're under the weather, West, but alas, the listeners are the priority, and we are here and making you suffer through it. So, thank you for sacrificing your vocal cord and whatever good feelings and vibes you had going for the day into the show. Um, I've been working on my mocks. The listeners online may notice that my background's a little bit more messy because I've been getting the Lego collection unpacked. Um,
Ooh.
and I just want to say something. When I've always struggled with art because I'm really critical of my work. And I'm working on a micro-ish scale Helm's Deep. It's like a 1 to
Mm.
40, and it's looking good, dude. I am so like, I just sometimes, normally I'm just sitting here like, "Oh, this is wrong, this isn't right, this isn't right," and I'm just focusing on those things no matter what, you know? And in this case, I'm like, "This is good. This is gonna be good," and I'm very excited. So, I did have to expand my larger scale base to fit it because again, it just if you're going to be that precise with scale, you got to just do it, sort of thing, right? You can't just like, you could do all this work on one part of it, and then if that deeping wall is too short, it's just gonna the whole thing is gonna look weird. So
Yeah.
I did expand the base, but it actually kind of killed two birds with one stone because I had not started Osgiliath yet because I was struggling with the size and scale of the base. And, when I mapped it all out, I was like, I'm gonna have to make this thing two base plates big, two of the big base plates big if I really want to capture what I want to capture. But now with this newer base size, I think I can get it in there and be still have couple constraints I have to work through and maybe make some compromises and get creative in some areas, but I can definitely achieve what I'm looking to achieve in that mock. So I'm excited. It's been a good week for Lego for me, despite mostly just digital building and unpacking boxes.
Well, I would encourage you to revisit the Osgiliath size discussion because I think, much like our guest from last week, you could probably get away with a smaller size and just capture that slice of life perspective. You know, if it's two or three Gondorian rangers behind a broken column or something with orcs rushing between them or something like that, like I think you could. So maybe reconsider the size on that. I understand the uh, impetus for wanting to go bigger, but I think you described it yourself, right? Like at some point, you're just like, I mean, I need to do a whole table here, right? Like, so. Anyways, I think
I
you could do
mean,
a small one.
I could do a 8x8 vignette. You know, I mean, you could do it. The building process that I have is I've picked the scene, sketched it out, and the specific scene that I'm looking to capture, which I could not do it.
Yeah,
I mean, could not. So understand the feedback, but in this case, because I want to include the boats on the water, if I'm doing that, I'm over compromising because it's either based off the size before it was either just the boat and the water or it was just the land, and I want both.
yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, best of luck to you, Grinch.
I'll we're good. I've got the size
Yeah.
already. We're all set.
Okay.
But I may still hold off on that one before Brick rolled and do something else just because, you know, there's not a lot of Gondorian soldiers out there in the minifigure world, so it'd be really nice if there
hmm
was
hmm
ever to be some. So I might just wait on that one for some, whatever reason.
Maybe if a set were to be released, it seems like a gap in the canon currently,
Mm.
a significant
Yeah,
gap. So,
very astute, West. Very astute. And if one were to be released for, you know, a couple months at that point, it'd be much easier to get your hands on what could be some expensive minifigures. So,
I mean, especially too
but
in time for June of this year. So,
yeah, that'd be really interesting timing, huh?
what almost serendipitous, if you will.
It's like, wow, that's exciting. Do you know what else is exciting, West?
Uh, I don't know, Grinch. This week's news. We'll get to it, but yes, ostensibly exciting Lego news.
Exciting Lego news.
Why don't you run the listeners through the news overview?
All right. Well, as I sort of teased earlier for everybody listening, this week was pretty quiet on the news front. So, reveals this week: Lego Batman: The Legacy of Dark Knight, Prince of the Museum trailer was revealed. Another Joker-based Lego Dark Knight game, which honestly sounds
Mhm.
fun. And then the Lego Brickheads Fortnite Beef Boss and Sky. I don't know what any of those words mean in this context. Uh, Insider's Reward was revealed. So a Brickhead Insider's Reward. Some kind of extras around the Lego universe. The Lego Group is donating $1.3 million to the greater Richmond, Virginia area to support different ways for kids to have fun in the Richmond area, which, as somebody who lived nearby just recently, Richmond has a lot going on right now for families, especially. So this is just going to make that city even better for families, which is really exciting. The Building the Lego Dream documentary is now available to watch on YouTube, and it follows 5 Lego creators who eventually became Lego employees and designers, like officially. And then the Lego Ideas Challenge for Lego Concept Model Design Internship has been announced. So, Grinch, what stands out for you this week?
Well, um, The other thing, the other elephant in the room is by the time this episode's out, it's going to be March 2nd, which means March 1st items are on the shelf. I don't know about you, West. I don't think so, because judging by your voice, you were probably not going out to the mall and shopping. But I was at the mall this weekend on Saturday specifically in the afternoon around 2 p.m. I purposely
Wow.
did not go in the morning because I was not going to buy Lego Pokemon and I did not want to be there for the rush of Lego Pokemon. But I did get on the pick a brick wall the 2/3 plate tall or brick tall snot piece, the half circle on the side with the snot brick, the
Oh, yeah.
newish piece in gray. Super, super awesome. But I digress.
Nice.
Um, there was still a lot of Pokemon there. And it was
Huh.
honestly not as busy as I anticipated for just a regular Saturday. I mean, it felt like a regular Saturday, right? It didn't feel like new releases, as opposed to when I went on Jan 1st, there was a line of 300-ish people. Now, this
Yeah.
technically the Pokemon sets were released on the 27th, right, for insiders. So there may have been a line there Friday morning, but you'd think by Saturday at 2 then these sets would be completely sold out, and they were not. They were not. So just thought that was interesting. I did want to say too, the Eevee looked better in person. Pikachu looked about what you'd think. But the news, that was more just the March 1st piece. The Lego Ideas Challenge is kind of cool. So that ends on March 18th. You can build essentially what is your own original IP Lego set. And if you win, you get to become a intern at Lego. So that's neat. And I think that
Yeah.
ties in well with that documentary that was just released on YouTube and Lego.com about Lego designers designing their dream set and becoming a designer. So it's kind of an interesting tie-in.
Yeah. There's been a lot of cases with like Lego Masters, or I guess now with Lego Ideas specifically, the designers have kind of graduated from being just fan designers. And this has always been the case. I mean, famously, that's how Brickmaster Jamie, was hired into Lego. I would imagine from like a Lego designer hiring perspective, this is the golden era of being able to mine talent across the world to join the Lego group because of just the many avenues that people have to share their creations, not only with Lego, but with the wider world, and get those picked up and appreciated. So, for example, one of the designers for the documentary was the individual who designed the Orient Express set for Lego Ideas, but he'd also designed the Lost City set for the Bricklink Designer Program. And so you see somebody who's gotten sort of two different, avenues to work with Lego in the past, and obviously they liked what he was doing and they hired him on.
Mhm.
More famously, the designer Aaron from Brickmasters, and I apologize, I forget his last name, but he just designed the Lego Iron Man figure. The buildable figure is kind of a bad way to describe it, but the newest Lego Iron Man that came out at the end of last year, that we both agreed was one of the best buildable Iron Mans we've ever seen. And since then, I've not only seen it transformed into the Gen 1 War Machine, I've seen it transformed into Gen 2 War Machine, but the Tips and Bricks website on Instagram, or their page, rated it a 25 out of 25, which isn't isn't, it doesn't happen very often for Tips and Bricks. And again, we both were like, this is probably the best version of Iron Man that we've ever gotten. And so to see Aaron design at that level is really, really cool. And he started off as a contestant on Lego Masters, and he's already designing what will be probably considered one of the greatest Iron Man sets ever. So, I mean, I just think it's really cool to see how these people get into this world and grow. And yeah, it's just neat to see.
Hopefully we're not hitting the the 90s equivalent of the music industry where we just get one-hit wonders, but, no, I'm just there's a lot of it's amazing, you hear about some of the Lego designers like you're mentioning, and, you know, realistically, all they really only ever work on 10 sets, right? It's not this ginormous career. It's really this career of passion, or so it's just always like hearing the stories. So, um, anything that excited you with the reveals? I mean, insider reward for Fortnite Brickheads has got you excited, or
No, no, Grinch. We're in a lull right now between
yep.
the May reveals, the summer reveals that I expect probably closer to May. So really just those May 1st reveals. We should be seeing, traditionally, right? We should be seeing things like a Star Wars wave being released here shortly for May. We should be seeing a, we usually see city stuff in the summertime, but we've sort of tangentially mentioned some other sets both in this episode and past episodes that we believe are to be revealed here shortly. So I would expect as March 1st rolls over into the month, we should be getting a lot more information about some really interesting sets. The spring wave of sets is usually smaller. It feels like it's more focused on larger sets too. Whereas in the summertime, that's when we get kind of more of our play scale stuff. So if things hold true, we should be having some really fun conversations in the few weeks. But until then, this is what we got.
Well, we have a robust topic today, so let's go ahead and move over to that main topic.
Let's do it.
Today's topic.
All right, so this week we are getting ethical, talking about the ethics of Lego. And I think we're going to leave this conversation a little bit up in the air. So apologies in advance to any listeners who don't want to, don't have a distinct, or I should say need a distinct answer. I think West and I will provide our own opinions, but I think we'll when it comes to ethics and morals, a lot of it is really the meaning comes from who's interpreting it, right? And what you believe. So we want to make sure we're kind of just presenting the facts versus presenting thoughts and feelings. So we've really taken a deep dive into a lot of ethics and morals here. So first, so I did want to mention this episode was actually suggested by one of our users a few weeks ago in our brick mail section, named Phil S UK. So thank you for the suggestion. And like I said, at the time, we actually were like, yeah, we just need to get some research in on this first and really make sure uh, we do our due diligence. So, West, I pose a question to you. Can a global toy giant remain ethically child first while also operating as a premium collector brand? Go. Yes. Okay. Bye, everybody. See you next week.
Yeah. No, it's an interesting question, Grinch, and there's a lot to unpack here. To include just things like large corporation ethics in general, and the impacts they have on society, to their own stated beliefs and goals and objectives as a corporation. So, obviously, as you alluded to, this is a long conversation, and the short answer is it depends. So, let's dive into it.
Yeah, I let's define ethics real quick, right? So ethics is a branch of philosophy that deals with morals and principles that governs a person's or organization's behavior, determining what is right, wrong, good, or bad. So I pose that question to you about Lego. When it comes to Lego, they're consistently ranked as one of the most reputable companies in the world. They win awards for trust, innovation, and impact, including, I believe, 22 Toys of the Year awards since 2000 or 1999.
Yeah.
But Lego has had its own fair share of controversies, as they say over in the UK, where Phil S is, or controversies here in the United States, with
They say it just like
some
that.
stuff exactly like blind bags, scarcity, exclusives, right? So um I wanted to kind of dive in here, West. Was there anything you wanted to outline on the discussion of ethics as a philosophy before we move into Lego specifically?
Yeah, so I just wanted to also clarify, when we talk about ethics, you also hear the word morals thrown out around a lot. And just to kind of level set and make sure that we're all talking the same language. You already mentioned ethics is the branch of philosophy that deals with moral principles that governs a person or organization's behavior. Ethics and morals are often regarded as synonyms of each other, but there is some distinction in how they're used. Morals often describes a individual's particular values concerning what's right and wrong, while ethics can refer broadly to moral principles. So morals, and if I'm kind of understanding this distinction correctly myself, my sort of internal understanding of this is morals is the application of ethics, right? It's how an individual applies what they believe is right or wrong. And so, anyways, I just wanted to sort of make that distinction. You might hear us sort of use them interchangeably. I don't think it's necessarily incorrect, right? When we talk about corporate ethics, we're talking not just about like Lego's corporate ethics, but just the ethics of corporations in general. Like, what does a business owe the people it supplies or supports? And then what does it owe the people who are invested into that business, for example,
Mhm.
right? But we also might talk about the morals of the Lego group, for example. So, anyways, now that we have sufficiently muddied the water on our definitions and terms, let's press forward into some of our key points.
Clear is the dark smoke translucent Lego brick with the opaque shading on it. So no, I think ethics is like, hey, I'm going to be a good person. Morals is therefore I'm not going to like punch people in the face, because if I do, they'll be hurt and it's bad. So morally, I don't punch people in the face because ethically, I need to be a good person. It's kind of, again,
Yeah,
they're
yeah.
muddying the water a little bit, but they build on each other. They complement each other. They're synonyms. They don't exactly quite mean the same thing, but they're synonyms. So let's talk about Lego's values, right? Their mission is, and this is directly from the Lego website, the Lego Group's company profile, to inspire and develop the builders of tomorrow. Check. Their guiding principle is only the best is good enough. Check. And they have 6 core values, which are imagination, creativity, fun, learning, caring, and quality. Again, these are all directly from Lego's website. So, but before we go further, Wes, let's unpack those missions, because from if we say that these are ethically guiding Lego's morals philosophy, it seems like they're doing this, right? So at the end of the day, a podcast over, episode done, all good.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely right. So as you mentioned, the mission of inspiring and developing builders of tomorrow. I mean, it's such a broad mission statement, but one that I do think is fundamentally something that's important to Lego. But now that we've established that's what they're trying to do, um, like you kind of joked, right? Like, yeah, discussion over. They're nailed it. Next question. But
So on Brick Mail
there's some
today, we have
yeah. But as you mentioned, right, there's some debate on how that ultimately happens. I mean, I think the one that sticks out to me the most is really that guiding principle of only the best is good enough. And I hear a lot of people quote that in the same breath that they then criticize the Lego group for maybe not doing the best in a certain situation. And I think, look, it's things are complicated. So um, we'll certainly get into that as we make the discussion. But I mean, uh, you know, if you were to say, hey, do this mission statement, this guiding principle, and these core values, do they represent the Lego group? I would have to say, yeah. I mean, I think so. I I don't no debate here. Sounds about right.
Yeah, and I would say when we talk, the problem with the only the best is good enough is it's a great guiding principle. I don't mean that's the problem. Problem is it's very subjective, right? I mean, you could sit here and say, well, in my opinion, the best is printed pieces with high quality, UV printed piece with laser engraved with details and texture. I mean, you could say that's the best, right? But as the Lego group defines it, and I'm not necessarily trying to be a Lego stan, right? They're a toy company first and foremost. Remember, their mission, right, before the guiding principle is to inspire and develop the builders of tomorrow. That primary audience, that primary target, the thing that they do is produce a toy to inspire play.
Yeah.
And it just so happens adults also really like to play. And that's again where the water gets a little bit muddy because back when Lego was founded, the intent was not to have this high quality collector's item that you're going to build once, it's going to sit on the shelf and you're going to sell it for 3x the value of the product in 5 years. That's not the point, right? The point is inspire the builders of tomorrow. So when Lego makes these decisions of stickers over pieces, right, or over printed pieces, while this episode is not necessarily about that specifically, I will take a small walk over in that direction real quick. Lego themselves has essentially answered the question on when it's appropriate to include a sticker and when it's appropriate not to include a sticker. And that's when the user experience is negative and it's deterring from the product at the end of the day. And
Yeah.
I'll unpack that really quick. Examples of where we've seen Lego use printed pieces is if they're using a printed piece or a what would be a sticker piece on multiple occasions, right? They transitioned with the UCS plaques from a sticker to a print because they got a lot of feedback on how terrible that experience was, and it was a horrible experience putting a giant sticker on that big, and if you mess it up, it's messed up, and this is supposed to be a nice collector plaque, et cetera, et cetera. Or the other thing I can think of is 4+ sets, right? 4+ sets
Yeah.
have prints only. Anything else, it's kind of fair game, right? So Lego's kind of made this decision on we will use stickers unless it's a 4+ set or unless we have future uses for a specific item that could be printed, right? And then minifigures. Originally, they put stickers on minifigures. The first minifigures ever had stickered
Mhm.
torsos. Could you imagine if we were living in that world? I mean, that would be terrible, right? But they said this isn't conducive of play and of what this thing is supposed to be doing, which is supposed to be this item used for play, right? This is a detrimenting factor because you sit around, you rough with your minifigures, the stickers get loose, they fall off. If they don't go on perfectly, you're moving them around, they get crap under them. That's not necessarily true of bricks, right?
Yeah.
So, well, we're not here to talk about stickers. I just want to say, like, again, that guiding principle is based off of that mission, which it is really important to remember in this context.
Well, and I'd also just like to highlight the difference between those two things, right? The mission statement is the thing that Lego is trying to accomplish. The guiding principle is how they're trying to get there. But the guiding principle, it's like, your compass or your North Star, for example. And it's something that you're going to look to reference every once in a while, but not necessarily, it's not the destination you're getting to, right? We're not walking to the north. We can't walk to the North Star, right? But like we're using that to get us to our destination, but we're not going to that specific location itself, right? And that's, I would say, maybe a oversimplified analogy or difference here of like what the mission and the guiding principle is for the Lego group. So when they say only the best is good enough, that is not their mission statement. That is not a promise to the Lego user that like, hey, we will always nail it every single time and 100% satisfaction or money back guarantee kind of a thing. no questions asked. They're just saying like we are pledging to you to always try our best. And hey, if we fall
Yeah.
short, we appreciate the feedback and we will make it up in the future. Or we will reevaluate what caused us to fall short and try to correct from there. Reorient ourselves to the North Star again of only the best is good enough and then go from there. But there's no, I think sometimes it's misconstrued as the mission statement for Lego. And that's maybe where some people get a little frustrated with, hey, this is a premium product. Why am I, seeing misprints on it or issues with molding and coloration and stuff? And it's just like, well, they're also, anyways. So I just wanted
No,
to make that clear too, as we make that to, continue this discussion.
it's a really good point, Wes. And I'm gonna take it just a step further because I think it really hammer homes kind of what we're trying to convey here. If Lego's mission, right, is to inspire the builders of tomorrow, that means they need to get these sets into as many kids' hands as possible, right? They wanna get this product out there, keep it at a price where they're not going to go out of business, make money. I mean, famously, Lego almost went out of business, right? Because they weren't doing this well. And so if we wanted to sit here and say, well, oh, but you said only the best is good enough, therefore every minifigure needs to have arm printing, front, side, back, leg printing, unique helmet molds, unique cloth pieces, etc., it would be so expensive, it would be unreasonable, right? I mean, and I'm going to this is a quick case study. Now, there's a lot more that goes into this than just me pulling prices from the internet. But if you look at Clone Army Customs, and this is nothing against them, they do excellent work. That is not the point of me bringing them up. The point is, though, is that I'm looking at their Commander Fox figure, $24. That's with the 20% discount. Now, if that discount's permanent, you could say, hey, well, that's just the price. Legally, they can't have a permanent discount on there and say this is the price. $24. The other kind of non-named characters, 18. On an episode, 2 episodes ago, we talked about how the effect of the price of the minifigure changing over time because they're more valuable to the consumer has led to this potential price increase, right? Pseudo price increase or whatever. If it was $24 instead of $5, because that's what it costs to produce these. Now, again, this is where the argument loses a little bit of its mustard, is because a Lego is an economy of scale, right? If you're doing this at a much larger scale, you can have considerable savings. So let's just say, for argument's sake, that's correct. It's $12. Let's say it's $12 instead of $24. I'm having that price. And again, it was already on sale. It's still that example of that pinball minifigure machine, instead of $4.50 or $4 per minifigure, you're talking about 3x that. That's $120 or $180 worth of minifigures for those 16 minifigures that came in that set. Only the best is good enough, sure. But if we're talking about that pinball machine, and I keep saying pinball machine, if we're talking about the vending machine, the minifigure vending machine, if we're talking about the Pirate Fort El Dorado set, as West so loves. Now, if we're talking about that vending machine, then could you imagine if that thing was $400? $350? Is that inspiring the builders of tomorrow because only the best is good enough? So that's where the first step is, to inspire the builders of tomorrow. And then how can we do that with this guiding North Star of only the best is good enough, right?
Yeah.
So morally, Lego is meeting that, or ethically, they are meeting that mission, right, of inspiring the builders of tomorrow.
And I would add, Grinch, and this is a question, and this is sort of unprompted. It's not in our notes or anything, but when you hear inspire and develop the builders of tomorrow, what is something that comes to mind that's unspoken about that sentence?
Is this a test? Because I think I'm going to fail. I don't know why. I'm just...
Well, I'm going to ask you first, and then I'll share what I think. But yeah, what comes to mind unspoken about that statement that's maybe implied but not implicit?
Kids?
Well, certainly, right? I mean, That could be, Builders of Tomorrow suggests a focus towards children, although not exclusively. I'm hearing accessibility. And
Mhm.
that, I think, kind of complements what you were just saying about, if your mission was only the best is good enough, now you're going to have to speak to exclusivity, higher price points, all sorts of things. But no, their mission is inspire and develop builders of tomorrow, which means that whatever they're doing needs to be generally accessible to a large group of people. And I say that because they haven't couched that phrase with, inspire and develop the builders of tomorrow who can afford our very expensive product, right? Like, that's not what their mission statement is. I'm being silly, obviously, but I think accessibility to whatever they are trying to use to inspire and develop the builders of tomorrow is, in fact, a key part of that mission statement that goes unspoken. So, and as you mentioned, right, if you were sort of misconstruing that guiding principle of only the best is good enough, yes, we can make incredibly detailed minifigures that are movie accurate with accurate props and movie accurate, elements to them and printing all over. And but to do so, the cost would be prohibitively high, so that the product is no longer widely accessible. And I think that's kind of what I took away from your conversation there.
Yeah, so I mean, yeah, we could do Lego could do printed pieces for everything, but it'd be at the sacrifice of quality, right? And then they're not meeting one of their core principles. And I know there's going to be some listeners that are sitting there saying, "Well, Lumi Bricks does it." Yes, they do. You have to understand from a business perspective, Lumi Bricks is a challenger brand, and they are only direct to consumer, which means there's no retailer that's going to be selling the product. Now, I know they're available on Amazon, but a lot of D2C brands go to Amazon because they extensively drop ship for Amazon. So you make the purchase on
Right.
Amazon, but it goes directly from Lumibricks. Amazon never owns the inventory, touches the inventory, or anything like that. That's why you get it in a separate package. Sometimes it's still in the original box because it's just shipping from a Lumibricks warehouse. So the Lego came up in a different time though, through brick and mortar retailers, and they did not have a direct to consumer website that was really strong until the early to mid 2000s, or even Lego retail stores. That's been a change that kind of Lego's done over time. So when you're talking about take home margin, Lego has to price these sets in a position where Walmart and Target and the shop down the store are still making money on them. Otherwise, they're not going to sell them, right? So Lego hasn't fully embraced this direct to consumer mindset and mentality, despite the fact that a lot of people, because they do these gift with purchase type things, buy directly from Lego. So that's one major point. Number two, Lumi Bricks is not investing in the category like Lego is. You don't see a press release of them doing braille bricks or inspiring builders or doing these different challenges, et cetera, to actually grow the building construction toy category. Number three, licensing. They have no license, right? So all of these things, those are three things I just named off the top of my head that could contribute to at least 50 basis or 500 basis points of margin, right? 50
Yeah.
percentage points of margin, because your retailer is going to need to at least make 35 or 30, right? The licensing fee, we guessed it was somewhere between 5 and 10, probably, just a guess, right? And then the investing into the category, give that another 10, right? We're automatically we're at 50. So it's not as simple as just saying, well, Lumibricks does that, right? Or this other knockoff brand on Amazon does that. There's a lot more that goes into it than that. So West,
Yeah, and I'm actually, Grinch, I'm looking at Lumibricks' website right now, because that just your conversation kind of sparked another question, like, well, what is Lumibricks' corporate ethics? So here's just kind of a quick glance at their mission statement. It says Lumibricks isn't about building, it's about belonging. Our community of builders, storytellers, and collectors inspire every new design. Through collaborative events and user-focused creations, we light up the world together. So, I mean, for what it's worth, a different product, but again, and I think this is an important thing that you mentioned. A company like Lumibricks is effectively playing catch up with Lego, right? And we've talked about this in the past, and we've talked about why actually. And I think this is a really great time to remind the listeners of why we sort of take the tone we do with alternative Lego, which is Lego's done all of the R&D for most of these pieces. I know Lumibricks and some of the other knockoff brands have their own individual pieces that are, their own thing. But Lego's doing all of the engineering for all of these different pieces. They're doing the design discussion. They're thinking through the, business decision of does it make sense from a business perspective for us to add this piece into our inventory? They're doing all of this homework. And then you get these alternative brands, which are effectively just copying these pieces without having to go through the due diligence of thinking through all of the limitations and use cases and everything that Lego does in order to get to yes on like green lighting a new piece, a new color, a new set, for example. And so if you're not having, like you mentioned, to do all of that legwork, you don't have that corporate expense that you have to mitigate or offset with prices the way they are. I would also add, the direct to consumer market is a relatively new thing. Well, yes and no, right? I mean, like the Sears catalog
Bro,
back
we're
in the
getting
day
pretty
was
old.
effectively direct to consumer, right? But the point is here that most companies that engage in that direct to consumer market exclusively are trying to counter position themselves against brick and mortar stores because they don't have the access to the Walmarts, the Targets. And so in order to get their name out there and build a consumer base, they're having to do that through direct to consumer sales. And so you see brands, and we're going to go away from Lego for just a second, but I think it's a really great brand from like men's care section. I'm sure some of our listeners have seen and have heard of Harry's, the razor company. They started as a direct to consumer brand. They built up enough of a market, and now you find them in Target and Walmart. But they weren't competing originally. They were always competing with someone like Gillette, but Gillette had the space in the store that they didn't have access to. Right. And they weren't going to get access to it until they could go to Target and say, here's our consumer base. Here's how much money we make annually. We would like to sell in your store. And it took years and years of being a direct to consumer company to eventually get there. And so my point is direct to consumer is great. It allows you to be scrappy. It allows you to cut costs. It allows you to kind of, make a big impact. But you aren't paying for things like the access to the Target store, the rent on the Lego store on Rodeo Drive or in Mall of America or wherever it is, right? You're not paying for all of these fixed costs that come with building this institution that is the Lego group. And so every time you're buying a Lego set, you're helping pay the rent on a Lego store, right? So there's all sorts of things that go into this. And so, these direct to consumer sets might be able to do things that feel better, but the devil's in the details here. It's nuanced. So
let's love it. Let's bring it back to Lego real quick because you got me. You got the juices flowing. And this is not against anybody who likes Lumibricks. This is not against anybody who's in Lego's LAN program. LAN from the community does seem to get a little bit of flack, especially from, it seems like, non-LAN members. And it seems like the feeling on that is, well, if you're in LAN, you're getting the set for free and you're hyping it up and you can't speak your mind because if you do, Lego's not going to like it and they're going to stop sending you free sets. Therefore, you're just a pawn for Lego, right? West, is that outlandish? Maybe would you agree with that sentiment?
yeah, I mean, I think that's kind of fair.
Okay. So let's talk about ethics for a second. If you're in LAN, how much are you paid for being in LAN?
Nothing.
But you do say Lego sent me the set for free, correct?
You do.
Do you know, and this is, by the way, this is something I've always heard. It is directly on Lumibricks' website. This is public information. Anybody go to lumibricks.com/pages/affiliate-collab, and you can see this information for yourself. If you join their affiliate program, Do you know how much commission you make on qualified sales?
Oh, I don't know. How much?
8%. That's 7 more percentage points, or 700 basis points, or 700 bips if you're one of the cool kids, than the Lego Ideas designer makes on a Lego Idea set, right? You earn an 8% commission. Do you think your content creator buddy out there that's pushing a Lumibrick set, who's a part of their affiliate program, who just has to say promoted a product tag and has not disclosed that, is talking truthfully? Or is the same criticism for land, I don't know, maybe times 8% more fair for this Lumibricks affiliate program? Ethically, I would argue Lego's program is much more ethical than this Lumibricks program is, because I
I
have
mean,
never heard somebody who's a Lumibrick affiliate, which there are a lot of them out there, you would be surprised, that say, by the way, I'm making 8% on my commissions. On Lego, they're saying, Lego sent me this for free. I'm a part of LAN. You can go see what LAN's all about. It's literally on the website.
at a minimum, a lot more transparent.
So, and again, I mean, Lumibricks is being fairly transparent about this too, right? And this is not to target anybody who's a Lumibrick affiliate, anybody in LAN. We're here to talk about ethics. And the topic of Lumibricks came up, and I just wanted to point that out, that those affiliates make commission on the products. And we're not talking about like Amazon affiliate program here, where it's like 0.01% per sale, where 8% is a pretty good chunk for a I mean, that is a very healthy affiliate program. So,
Well, and again, right? You're a direct to consumer company. You're not paying that cost. You're not having to price things to
yep.
account for the store making money and their markup. So if I'm a direct to consumer company and I could probably afford a 10% markup effectively for an affiliate program, because I'm not paying a 20% markup, or pricing things for a 20% markup for a brick and mortar sales discussion.
So just, again, we're not making any conclusions on this episode. You can make your own. We are just empowering the listeners with facts, data, and objective information. So let's pivot back to Lego and their ethics. Let's talk about their positive ethics, or their positive morals in action. I've got a few things that we've outlined here. So their child-centered play and development. I think we've talked about that a little bit, right? With their mission is to inspire the builders of tomorrow. But, they really focus on that learning, that STEM, that creativity, that building. I mean, again, they've had their mishaps. I'm looking at you, Lego Video. But West, what did you want to add to the kind of child-centered play and development, positive, ethical discussion?
Man, I mean, again, we've talked about this in our Friends episode, but that would be my greatest evidence towards this point, was our discussion of how Lego basically came to the conclusion that they needed to create a Friends line, which was they felt and had criticism that they were not making their toy representative of 50% of the world's population.
51.
And there you go. It's challenging because, if you're a young girl and you're playing Lego or something and you get like the Lego City set and you don't see a female police officer in it, for example. This is like back in the 90s, by the way. Today, I think Lego's done a great job with improving that representation. But in the 90s or 80s or whenever, you're just seeing, this character, right? And so, and we already acknowledged that Lego said that girls, when they like to play, that their finding found that girls, when they like to play, like to insert themselves into the story. They like to be more part of the story, which is why we see Friends lines have such vivid and deep storylines to them that we don't see in like the Lego City line, for example. We have named characters, they have friends, they have parents, in the latest case of Friends in the last 2 years, they've grown up, right? Like there's this whole adventure here within the larger Lego Friends universe to explore. Whereas like young boys just like to, play with their minifigures. They like to, chase the bad guys or whatever. It's not so much narratively based as it is action oriented based. And so the fact that Lego's even doing the internal analysis to understand that, and then B, develop an entire toy line around that idea, I would say is a clear example of how they, as a company, prioritize that child-centered play and development. And the fact that they took the risk that they did, I think is huge. So, like I said, I think that's probably some of the best evidence we have towards that idea of child-centered play and development.
Okay, big check, right, on that, the focusing on the builders of tomorrow. Safety and quality leadership is another one that I outlined, right? So Lego has one of the lowest recall rates in the toy industry. There are, and this is according to the, I don't know who the CPSC, which is a U.S. Child Protective something. They do the toy recall, right? They're the people that do the toy recalls. There's on average about 120 to 170 per year, specifically in this mid 2000s range where there was a lot. But if you're looking around 100 a year across all brands, Lego has had 3 recalls since 2000. There was a one on the IR Speed remote. The batteries would overheat in 2009. The Explorer Super Truck in 2002. The wheels could detach. Imagine a Lego set detaching. And that was a choking hazard. The issue with this was that it was targeted. It was specifically for younger children. And then there was Lego Primo, which was a little rattler. And sorry, this was 1997, where an infant could choke on part of a component. So 3. In that time, Mattel, Hasbro have had more than a dozen, affecting millions of products, Mattel being the worst offender that has kind of repeat recalls pop up every year. The data gets a little bit hazy, so that's as specific as I'm going to be on that. But a notable difference if you look at the 3 major toy companies in the United States as far as recalls go.
And Grinch, I did want to just clarify, the organization that runs the recalls is the Consumer Product Safety Commission here in the United States.
Thank you.
So, thank you. Yes, and you can go to their website
I was
and
just
look
seeing
up
it abbreviated. Yes, they do the recalls.
The CPSC.
Child Protective Services of silliness. So anything you want to add there? I mean, and that's when we talk quality there, and again, Lego doesn't get into that specificness of quality in their core guiding values, but we assume it's quality of the actual, prints at the end of the day. It just also quality of making sure kids don't accidentally die while using your product. That's pretty important, right?
Yeah. Well, I mean, this is where it's funny, as we've done this podcast and we've explored Lego as a company, and you've, Grinch, talked in the past about like a company like Walmart, for example, being not really a consumer, a sales company, but a logistics company, right? And we've, in the example of McDonald's being not really a food company anymore, but a logistics company to some extent. And when I see something like this, I see Lego not as a toy company, but as an engineering company, on par with some of the greats, like the automotive engineers, for example. And when I see something like only the best is good enough, I don't necessarily think, the molding has to be the exact same color. The prints have to be completely aligned. Like those are, yes, important things too. I see things like failures. Do my pieces break off? And do I have a catastrophic failure of this piece in such a way that it could lead to a more dangerous outcome? And I see Lego as an engineering company thinking through all of this of like, what are the different failure cases of our product? And the fact that the number of recalls, safety recalls on Lego products has been so small, I would say, again, going back to that idea of like the best is good enough. Like the best is what we are trying to achieve effectively, right? And sorry, so let me go back and find that specifically. Only the best is good enough. I think Lego's crushing it if I'm looking at it from like an engineering perspective, because that's an incredibly small number of critical failures that they've had to mitigate versus anything else. And so if that's how you're measuring only the best is good enough, again, I think they're doing a wonderful job as a company. So it all just,
Yeah,
as we kind of mentioned, it depends, right? It depends on how you look at this.
to add to your car example, right? Toyota's not out here throwing cherry hardwood on their dashboards because that's the most high quality wood. I'm not a woodworker. I don't actually know. What they're doing though is they're putting something there that's not going to fall apart after 3 years of use, or it's meant for it's a family vehicle. Therefore, it's not something you're going to have to go and start polishing once a week, and that if your kid accidentally spits on, it's going to just stain it, right? It's designed to hold up for a family over time, and that's what it does, right? And I don't mean to piss off car people, but thinking about some other brands out there like Jeep, the old adage is you get 2 Jeeps, one to drive and one to drive while the other one's in the shop. So I think cars is a good example there, because when you think of quality in cars, you don't necessarily think of luxury. Now, some people may, but that first step in quality is, does the dang thing go forward when I tell it to go forward? When it gets in a
You know what, Grinch?
crash, does it fall apart on the road, or am I safe?
And absolutely. And there is an intersection of quality and luxury. There absolutely is, right? That's where you get brands like Mercedes-Benz, right? You
Whose
have
quality has kind of fallen off over the past 10
well,
years, though.
fair enough, right? Maybe historically or something to that effect. And again, right? Like every car person has their own opinions about everything. So
Our
we don't
opinions
need
are
to
our own. Disclaimer.
necessarily take a stance there on one way or the other. But
Lego's
but
going
the
to take
point
the
is, right?
BMW route and start charging you a subscription to use the bricks.
Oh
Yeah,
my
like, hey,
gosh.
you can buy the set, but if you want to rebuild it, you have
You
to
want to use your
subscribe
Smart
to a
Play brick.
Rebuilder Academy. Yeah.
Yeah, you want to use your Powered Up app. It's a $5 a month fee for, yes. And for those of you who aren't familiar, BMW has literally created subscription models for heated seats in their cars.
Remote start.
And it's ridiculous, dude. I mean, that's like insane. I don't know how they're getting away with that, or how people
They're not,
or why people,
by the way.
I mean, yes. Well, yes. Anyways, but there is an intersection of luxury and quality, right? But again, if we go back to the Lego mission statement, which is to inspire builders of tomorrow, with the intersection of quality and luxury, you get exclusivity because it's a higher price point. And now that works counteropposed to your your actual mission statement, which is accessibility to the product, because my goal is to inspire as many builders of tomorrow as possible. And so I think your example with Toyota is really a great one, which is, I just bought a new Toyota last year myself. Do I like the plastic interior? No. Do I have any doubt that that interior is going to hold up over years and years of wear and tear? No, I do not. So, it's not, I'm not buying a luxury product. I'm buying something that will work. And sometimes quality is a luxury of its own, but that's a whole nother discussion for another day. So, or though maybe it is a way to look at Lego sometimes too, which is like you are getting something that you can trust. And that does come at a cost too. So, anyways,
Any listeners that are sitting there with burning ears thinking these 2 Lego stands are just, corporate Lego hacks and spies,
schmucks, yeah.
we're gonna get to the bad as well, I promise. But when you present an argument, we're gonna present the good and then the bad, and then we're gonna leave the conversation and wrap it up. So I promise you, 3 more points here, and the bad is coming.
And
So
there's plenty of bad that we're going to address. Yes.
yes, there is. So Wes, the next one I had, and you kind of touched on it, so I don't think we have to delve into it too much further, unless there's any other additional points you want to add outside of the friends example. Is the social responsibility and philanthropy. Lego invests heavily in social programs to support education in children. I kind of talked about it with that LumiBricks comparison. This is an area where LumiBricks does not, right? Where Lego is really leaning in on their core values and helping kind of build this category, making sure people have bricks to play with, making sure that there's that STEM education focus, right? So there's the Lego Foundation, which funds early childhood learning initiatives globally. They did a bunch of donation and programs during COVID with the COVID relief crises. And Lego heavily supports equitability, equality is another word, I guess, through their Learning Through Play program. West, you talked about the Friends example, right? They came out with this own Friends product line because they said, hey, our product does not reflect the demographic of the world, right? We've seen it more recently with Lego expanding their skin tone color palette, stuff like that. We've seen other, I mean, there's just a bunch of examples here of Lego really kind of leaning in and supporting this area.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, literally in the news this week, we talked about how Lego was donating $1.3 million to the greater Richmond area of Virginia to help support and develop activities for children. I mean, what else do you need to use as an example of that social responsibility? And I really enjoyed the story of Lego during the COVID epidemic, basically pivoting and producing PPE for doctors in Europe and elsewhere around the world. They were building face masks and face shields with their injection molding machines. And, you talk about a company that retools for something that is unexpected, unplanned, but it's the right thing to do because they can do it. I mean, here's an example of that, right? So I just thought that was really, really cool.
So the next one, and this is a little bit of a gray area because inherently Lego is not super environmentally responsible, but they are working on becoming net zero, right? A net zero impact. But their environmental responsibility, they are, however, actively investing in sustainability and being transparent within it. They use renewable energy in their factories. They have smart zero waste factories. They've developed plant-based recycled plastic. They've updated some of their ABS, and they've even gone as far as they did their PET brick program that was a sustainable initiative that they actually ended up canceling, which you'd say, well, that's bad, but they actually did a life cycle analysis that showed that it was producing higher emissions. So while the brick was better, the actual process of producing the brick was much worse. So the net was a worse production cycle and therefore a worse impact overall. So they could have just greenwashed it and said, hey, no, we're doing this. Yay, woo, woo, woo. But that wasn't the actual responsible and sustainable thing to do. So they scrapped it, which, by the way, is millions and millions of dollars wasted. So inherently, Lego as a plastic toy is not a good for the environment toy, but they've taken the steps to make sure everything else around it is, including bringing in for programs such as recycling your bricks, sending them to Lego, getting some store credit so they can go buy new bricks and that they can make sure that it doesn't end up in a landfill somewhere or the ocean, etc.
Yeah, absolutely. And Grinch, this is one of the ones that I wanted to highlight as sort of the negative side of things too. But as you mentioned, sort of the great irony here is that as a company, yes, while Lego is contributing to the problem of plastic and single-use plastic in our environment, they're also taking extraordinary steps as a company to do it as efficiently as possible. And again, understanding their perspective. If you look at them from an engineering perspective, there's really no other material out there right now that meets the needs to provide the quality of play that ABS
Mhm.
plastic can do. And so, and they've explored it, and I'm sure they're going to continue to explore it. And I'm sure that things like the, development of AI and stuff will help Lego continue to explore different formulations for. I'm sure they're like, just give me an excuse to get away from ABS plastic, and I will. But again, right, the caveat is, but it has to meet the high standard that we have for production and play quality, and can't be any worse than ABS plastic already is in terms of its long-term effect on the environment. And so, there's a series of things that they have to consider before they make a huge pivot like that. And I think by like trying to make their supply chain as environmentally friendly as possible, their production process as environmentally friendly as possible. They're taking those really important steps to find those edge cases that they can make a difference, and they're doing it. This year in the United States, we're starting to get all paper bags in our sets now, finally. And that's huge. I mean, that was plastic that was, at least in the US, effectively being thrown out. It could have been recycled in some very small use cases, but not something that was widely recyclable here in the US. Now we have a paper bag that is wide. I can recycle it. So that's huge.
Mhm.
That's waste that's not going into a landfill. So I think Lego is, again, ultimately doing their best within the context of what they're doing as a corporation to be as environmentally responsible as possible.
So the next area of ethics in action with Lego would be their diversity and inclusion. Wes, we've hit this one similar, and again, it's very similar to the social responsibility and philanthropy. But we've hit it in this episode already. We've hit it in a lot of our other episodes, such as the Western episode. I know you have a couple examples that you'll share of this. One area I wanted to focus on is just Lego's transparency when it comes to addressing issues and apologizing for issues that they've created. A couple a couple of areas where they've had these issues would be offensive product descriptions. There's one from 2015 in Lego's Mixel line. There was a character named Turg. Originally, on the product description page on Lego's website, the character was described as a back of the bus window licker, which was considered derogatory towards people with intellectual disabilities. I don't just I was
Wow.
reading it. You're like, Jesus, like, so they were like, oh crap, sorry, we did not mean anything by that. My guess is that might have been a translation error between languages,
Yeah.
most likely. In France and in French, I should say, uh, it, window shopping, which we would describe in the United States as walking down Main Street or through the mall, looking at what's in the window, browsing a catalog. Window shopping is actually, the direct translation is window licking, right? So that to me sounds like an error, and maybe one that somebody didn't catch when they were doing a translation or something. But they apologized immediately, changed it, updated their internal review process to make sure stuff like that didn't happen again.
Don't
I
use Google
may
Translate, and then
yeah, just maybe proofread things.
Mhm,
I
mhm.
may pronounce this wrong, but Maori language was used for Bionicle originally, not exclusively, but they was heavily inspired by, and they actually just directly used some of the same words. And that community objected it, saying that they were being used to trivialize their culture, et cetera, and how they were being used. So they removed and changed some of those words and apologized and made sure that they were getting the right context from traditional cultures in the real world. Um, and yeah, I mean, other examples, West, I know you have a few to share as well.
Yeah, so like we already talked about just, the history of the Lego Friends line. We've talked about in the past. You already mentioned too, seeing more skin tones represented in the Lego universe. We've seen people with varying skin tones represented. We've also seen minifigures now more increasingly represented with disabilities, to include this last year the both creation of a printed torso piece with a sunflower lanyard, and then this summer specifically, or this year specifically, a sunflower lanyard piece indicating a non-visible disability. So Lego's gone well out of their way, I think, to and is continuing to do so. So it's not like it's mission accomplished, we did it, but is continuing to make sure that they are representing the larger population as a whole in the Lego sets that they produce, which is really exciting and interesting. And we've talked through our own history of that. We've talked through why the Western line probably will not make a direct comeback on the way it was sort of originally set up. Although we've said acknowledged how maybe Lego could do it in the future in a way that is both appropriate and representational of the different cultures and ethnicities that they're trying to capture in the Lego universe, but it wouldn't necessarily be cowboys and Indians as was originally portrayed in the late 90s. So, but like you said, Grinch, they've definitely made huge steps to try to both rectify past mistakes and avoid them in the future. So,
The last area I wanted to cover as far as good ethics or proof of good ethics would be corporate governance and reputation. So, this would include things like winning awards. Time gave Lego Toy of the Century in the last millennium, right? We don't know who's got it in this millennium yet because guess what? It's not,
we're just a
it's
quarter of the way
not
through.
$29.99 yet. Or I guess in this century, yeah, we're only a quarter of the way through this century too. But in some other examples, Lego has also, I mentioned the Toy of the Year award. I think it's 22 Toy of the Year since 1999. A couple examples. One was the nanoscale Hogwarts Castle. And then also the world's most reputable company by Global Rep Track, not toy company, world's most reputable company. This was 2017 and 2015. They were number one. 2019, they were number two, and they're consistently in the top 10 throughout many years. The ranking measures public perception, by the way, of trust, product quality, governance, workplace, citizenship, leadership, and performance. So that's a pretty big award, right? Not just toy company, world's number one most reputable company in 2017 and 2015. So the world has spoken, right? They've got their. We went through their mission statement, and they're doing it.
Yeah, and that's funny because I did not know that, the fact that they were rated as the most reputable country. But it doesn't surprise me, knowing what we know about Lego and reviewing this week's episode, that they would qualify for something like that. That totally makes sense. So,
was there anything else you wanted to add on that governance and conversation?
No, I mean, I think that's
bad.
pretty much covers it. I think we've talked a lot about how Lego does a really great job of trying to practice what they preach. We talked through their core values, their mission, their guiding, statements, or their guiding governance. But Grinch, I mean, what are some areas where maybe they've fallen short? Because we've talked about they always try to correct back, but maybe there is some controversy here. Is it all sunshine and rainbows over in Bill in Denmark, or are there clouds every once in a while?
Well, let me add a little more sunshine because I need to correct the record real quick. I said 2017 and 2015. It was also number one in 2025, 2024, 2023, for a total of 5 times in the past 6 years, consecutive years. Number one. Number two in 25, by the way, was Rolls-Royce. Number 3 was Rolex. Number 4 was surprisingly Harley-Davidson. And number 5 was the Bosch Group. So some pretty good competition up there. But yeah, so Wes, let's talk about the bad. Yeah. I mean, that's pretty cool, huh? So
I wouldn't expect Rolls-Royce to be up there. So Rolex I would get. But anyways, and surprised
Well, I
IKEA is
just
not up
maybe
there.
because their engine. I don't know. Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah,
I don't
is
know.
that Rolls Royce the luxury car or Rolls Royce the jet engine manufacturer? Because two very different Rolls Royces, technically, I believe. So, but anyways,
But they're the
another
same company.
conversation for another day. So,
On this episode of AFOLs Welcome, we talk about Rolls Royce. So, all right. So let's talk about the bad, because it's not all sunshine and rainbows, as you're mentioning. Before we get into the unethical Lego in action, I wanted to provide two definitions. Number one, what's a business? A business is an organized entity or activity that produces, buys, or sells goods and services to satisfy customer needs, usually with the goal of generating a profit. So, business is something that provides a good or service for essentially money, right? Something of value. If it's
absolutely.
not monies, it's gold. Something that they can get monies from. Gambling. This will come back up, I promise. Gambling is the act of staking or risking money or something of value on an event with an uncertain outcome, primarily determined by chance, with the possibility of winning a prize of value and the risk of losing the original stake, i.e., you're putting money up to get more money with the risk of losing all of that money that you put up. So let's talk about the bad. From the first thing, and I think I kind of just generally outlined all of this as anti-consumer friendly practices. Not illegal practices, but just anti-consumer friendly practices. And I didn't even go as far as saying anti-consumer practices. Number one, collector scarcity and artificial rarity. West, I know you love to talk about gift with purchases and FOMO, so how about you unpack that one for the listener?
Well, Grinch, like you mentioned, we've already talked about it a little bit, but the basic premise here is that by advertising gifts with purchase for in-store purchases or online purchases from a certain window while supplies last, Lego is effectively generating artificial rarity and that collector scarcity through that gift with purchase vehicle. Now, it's an equation because the collector scarcity piece isn't always the case, because sometimes that gift with purchase is relatively benign. For example, I think the newsstand from the Tudor Corner set is a good example of a relatively benign gift with purchase, where there wasn't any exclusive minifigures, prints, stickers, that kind of thing that came with the set. And you could theoretically reproduce that set on its own. Or another good example, ironically, is the Nazgul from the
Fell Beast.
the Fell Beast, right, set that was released, the gift with purchase, or even the droid control ship that was released 2 years ago for May the 4th, right, where it was the battle droids in the ship, and that ship itself wasn't necessarily anything special. There wasn't really anything exclusive in that set per se, other than just the aggregation of those pieces in that time for Lego. So in that case, I would argue you're not necessarily creating collector scarcity. You're creating artificial rarity in that this set is only going to be released in a very small amount of numbers. But the point is here that it kind of ebbs and flows with things like gift with purchases, where gift with purchases, I think, sort of bend into this realm of maybe an anti-consumer friendly practice is when you get something like the Endurance, and you have a Ernest Shackleton minifigure in the lifeboat, and that's the only place you could ever get an Ernest Shackleton minifigure. Or with the Eiffel Tower, you have a Gustave Eiffel's apartment, and that's the only time you're ever going to get the Gustave Eiffel minifigure, or the Jules Verne minifigure, or the Jane Austen minifigure. And we can go through a list of, famous minifigure examples of where this was a one-off minifigure from a gift with purchase that is never accessible anywhere else, and now costs a significantly more amount of money than what it should have cost had that been a standalone set itself. And so, anyways, some famous historical examples. Grinch, you have some other examples as well, for
Well,
different
I did
sets.
want to say, in your examples there, like the news corner, it did have stickers though, and you can only get those stickers in that set. The sticker sign on the top, right? And
Yes,
not that you were saying it didn't, but the AFOL's apartment also had. So it's not just necessarily even the minifigures, right?
yeah,
Sometimes a
fair enough.
minifigure can be exclusive because it's an exclusive combination of
Right.
minifig parts, but the parts themselves aren't exclusive. Um, so it's just that's where it pays to kind of be an astute uh, um, Lego fan, right? If for the
Hmm.
Nazgul, for example, the only exclusive thing was the torso, and they put it on Pick a Brick. So if you had a bunch of black legs and heads and capes, you could make a bunch of them, right? Or you could buy the pieces
Yeah.
separately. But point is yes, they do these gift with purchases, and they include things that you can only get in them. I'm thinking of the Pokemon badge that just came out, right? While there's no real exclusive pieces, there are the printed or sticker piece. I'm not quite sure which one it is yet. That will only be available in that set, right?
But
So far.
are Grinch, are we ready for me to apologize for Lego and be a Lego apologist, or do we want to? Because I have an apologist take on this. So, why don't we? Do we have any other examples for sort of
Oh
that
yes,
collector scarcity and
um,
artificial reality?
Mr. Gold, right?
Yep.
They came out with, what was it, 10,000 of them in Series 10. They put them in random cases, and it was a frenzy. I mean, people, that's you look at a sealed case of Series 10, and it's 20 times the price of any other series, sealed case, because there could be a Mr. Gold in it. A couple other examples of the collector scarcity and artificial rarity that I have are splitting. I mean, this is just basic Lego sets too. This isn't even the FOMO aspect, but just splitting minifigures into multiple sets in a series. So, for example, oh, Star Wars: The Force Awakens, or I guess I should say The Rise of Skywalker is a more recent example where if you want to get all the figures from that movie, you had to essentially just buy all of the sets or buy them on Bricklink. The Infinity War sets. This is usually something that happens with movie sets in a wave of sets where you have to really buy the entire wave if you want to get all the minifigures. Whereas before it may have just been 3 out of the 6 sets.
Yeah.
Another example would be, and again, this is where I will actively be a Lego apologist on, would be the Captain Rex in something like the Venator, and people saying, "Oh my God, that's the most exclusive, amazing Captain Rex minifigure ever." Lego not once said, "Oh, when you get an exclusive Captain Rex minifigure that will only be released in the set." As a community, we said, "Well, if it's in this Venator UCS set, it's got to be exclusive because it's a $500 set, and therefore I'm going to spend $150 on the secondary market to get this one minifigure." And then they come out with the Microfighter for $10 a year later. Now, I would argue that ethically, that's actually more morally good than it is bad, because they never said it was exclusive. And most kids, the builders of tomorrow, cannot buy a $500 Venator, but they might really want Captain Rex. So therefore, putting him in a $10 set is actually increasing accessibility. So from a moral standpoint, it's actually good, right? Again,
Yeah.
make your own conclusion on that, but it's not like Lego came out and said, "Hey, this is exclusively in the set." Now, again, morally, ethically, they didn't. That is the sentiment, and they didn't do anything to it's. They were not on the shelf at the same time, right? It was
Yeah.
specifically a year later, right? So, yes. So, West, I think you were going to apologize on behalf of Lego for something. Please do.
Well, I wasn't necessarily going to apologize on behalf of Lego, but I was just going to say that this isn't necessarily new. And this has been happening for a long, long time. I remember the gold C3PO, the chrome C3POs that they came out with that were limited. There's the chrome Stormtrooper that they came out with. I think you gave me one. You have one yourself.
Dude,
They
those are
had,
like $150 now.
there's like a chrome
Sorry,
Darth Vader, right? Like a black chrome
just
one.
reminding you how welcome you are. That's all.
I mean, it's just, but it's wild that like, and that had happened. That was in the early 2000s. That wasn't recently. And so it's fair to be upset with, the Ernest Shackleton minifigure in the gift with purchase that I could only get once and it's never going to be released again kind of a thing. Totally fair. But this isn't necessarily new. And I think your example of how they spread out minifigures across a wave is a really great example of like, again, maybe sort of like this morally dubious, I would say is probably the best way to approach it, because it's sort of, again, if you want to collect the entire thing, forces you to buy every single set to get duplicates of some things. And I think back to a really great example of this is like the Rogue One wave from the Lego Star Wars kind of recent waves. I say recent, it was almost a decade ago. That's so scary.
It was actually a decade ago.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, yes. Not quite. We're still a few months away from a decade, but we're within the year of it being a decade ago. Oh,
Just
geez.
hold on to that for everything it's worth, buddy. You sounds like you need it.
But the Orsa Krennic minifigure, for example, was only available in his shuttle, which itself was, I think, a $100 set.
Yeah.
And that was the only time you got it. Or the different shore troopers that they came out with in that wave that were exclusive to I forget the name of the TIE fighter variant that it was, but there was the TIE landing craft thing that had one version of the shore trooper.
The TIE
There was
Striker?
the set, the TIE Striker, yep. There was the set with the landing pad that had its own version of the shore trooper that had unique printing. And then there was the polybag version that had its own printing and different version of the shore trooper. And each one was unique. And so to sit here and maybe criticize Lego over the gift with purchase thing of only, of creating these unique minifigures in this artificial scarcity with these gift with purchases or the, collectible minifigures, for example, I would say is maybe, I guess I'm not apologizing for Lego, but, from their perspective, I'm sure they're like, well, you guys have been tolerating this for years, so I don't understand why this is any different. We haven't really been hiding this. And to your point, Grinch, of like the Captain Rex thing, there's never been a promise of exclusivity with anything, right? I mean, Lego, the only time Lego has ever really called something collectible is with the CMFs, and collectible and scarce or exclusive
or
are two
Ultimate
different
Collector
discussions.
Series.
Or Ultimate Collector Series. Or in the rare case that they did the 20th and 25th anniversary minifigure series for Lego Star Wars, the implication was you can collect them all. But again, it wasn't that they were rare, right? That is sort of the market forces that are at play after Lego has produced it and released it to the world, that Lego frankly has no control over. I'm going to say yes and no to that, actually, but by and large, Lego has no control over the fact that Captain Rex gets resold for $150 because that's just what he's worth because of the high demand for the minifigure. I say yes and no because, I mean, certainly Lego at this point has to have awareness over it, right?
Well, yeah, they own Bricklink, right? And they control the supply aspect. They don't control the demand aspect. They control
and
the
they're not
supply,
blind and they're
right?
not deaf, right? They and I don't mean that disparagingly.
Selectively.
I just mean in the case of like they know that people are selling these on the secondhand market. They know that there's a huge demand for a minifigure like this. So when they do release a set like the Venator with a new version of Captain Rex, I almost said exclusive, a new version of Captain Rex, they have to know that that minifigure is going to be sought after. And I think their answer was the Microfighter.
Uh-huh.
But like you mentioned, Grinch, there was a time between when the Microfighter was available and the Venator was available when Captain Rex did go for $200 a pop, which is ridiculous. But at that point, I don't know if it's Lego's issue as so much of it's like the Lego community's issue of just A, being impatient, and B, people just being willing to pay that much. I mean, that's just economics, baby. Like, can't.
You could say Lego has an obligation if if the issue is pseudo being created by Lego, they have an obligation to address it, right?
But then I would also argue that the release of the microfighter was them addressing it,
Sure,
right? So, I mean,
sure. It's just
mission
not how
accomplished.
people wanted it to be addressed, right?
Well, right, and then you have the people who are butthurt because they bought a $150 minifigure that's now worth $10, and you have the, it's like who are you going to satisfy in this equation, right? Like,
Right.
you can't satisfy everybody. So,
Well, and it's again, the reason I had the definition of a business is because it's important to remember that Lego is a business, and they are entitled to their own strategies to do that thing that we said businesses were out to do, which is make money. And what's interesting with
absolutely.
gift with purchases is they always include the value. First of all, because you'd never give something away for free without telling somebody how much it costs, right? That's just like business 101, right? But a lot of times it's like, oh, gift with purchase valued at $19.99, and they cross it out and they say it's free when you buy this, right? Or it's $29.99. Cross it out and they say it's free when you buy this. If you had a $200 set and you're getting this $20 set for free, it's 10% off. Lego could also just say, hey, if you buy this set, you get 10% off. If you pre-order the set, you get 10% off.
Yeah.
I'd argue that's not very exciting. Like, I would, and I know it's maybe, I hope it's not hypocritical, but I'd much rather be in a situation where you're kind of getting something cool and exciting as a reward versus just 10% off. Like, that's just not exciting, right?
Well, maybe
so. It
maybe
is a
that,
strategy to sell a set, right? And on a P&L, what they're saying is we're giving 10% off. When you boil it down to just numbers, buy $200 set pre-order, get minus $20 on it, because that's how much it's going to cost us to produce that thing to give to you. Therefore, we'd be giving you $220 for the sets for $200. That's the simplest
sort
form.
of, right? Because they're giving you two things for the price of one thing. Whereas if you would have bought the two things, you would have bought them for the price of the two things. So they're not really taking 10% off the set. They're taking
adding
10%
of value.
They're adding 10% of value, and then they're taking away 10%. So you're still just paying the value at the end of the day.
Right. But I would rather do that than pay 10% less on the set.
And what I wanted to highlight was the psychological aspect of that. And listeners recall our interview with Bricka magazine, where he talked about his interview with the psychologist and learning that people, by and large, are wired to want more rather than less. And I'm sure there's something of that at play here, which is if I have the option to say, hey, Grinch, you're going to pay $200 for this, and you're going to get two things that normally are going to cost you $220. Or I can give you the one thing for $180. What would you like?
Money, please.
I think we are just wired to want to get the two things for the $200 because we're like, that's more. I'm getting more for my money, which is ironically not true, because you're getting more for your money if it's $180 for the Lego set. That, like, it's psychological, right? And again, maybe that's the thing that is sort of morally dubious, but it works for Lego. Their mission statement as a company at the end of the day, as a for-profit company, is to make money. They're making money. So, like,
just in a morally gray area.
I know we had a conversation of this earlier in the week, and I the saying that I kind of had was, don't hate the player, hate the game, right? This is something Lego Group is doing. Everybody does this. This is how advertisements work, how they like drill down and target you at a psychological level to, have this keeping up with the Joneses mentality, or, it's the Mercedes-Benz Christmas commercial that now when you see it, it associates, Christmas with Mercedes-Benz and not time with your family. this is just how consumerism works. And so, if you have an issue with the way Lego Group is doing this, that's fair. But like, that's not a Lego Group problem. That's just a problem of economics and uh, consumption of stuff in general, and our own human psychology, which I'm sure, traces back to like the squirrel with their acorns and needing to collect enough acorns for the wintertime, right? Like, it's just we're gatherers, we're hunters, and we're not necessarily giveawayers. So I think this goes back to like, roots of human psychology here. And so to necessarily put all the blame on someone like the Lego Group for the way that they're marketing what is effectively a toy at the end of the day is maybe. So I guess I am apologizing for Lego.
Sounds like it. But no, I think at the end of the day, there is a little bit of ethical tension here, right? And it frustrates fans. One thing that
Absolutely.
you or I haven't experienced, we've heard anecdotally, but we haven't experienced, is it also probably frustrates children a little bit too, because, well, I want that droid carrier. I just want the droid carrier. Why can't I buy that? Dad, why can't I go to the store and buy that droid carrier? Well, yeah, you got to buy, $200 worth of Star Wars stuff.
Yeah.
It benefits collectors and it supports a secondary market, right? And you could argue that, well, Lego does not control that secondary market. You could say they do because of Bricklink, but they don't control the fact that there is a secondary market.
They're certainly
But
aware it
the gift with
exists.
purchases do certainly support it in the sense
And they
of, hey,
know,
well, if you buy this set early, you could sell it for $200, right?
they know what they're
Make
doing,
30% of your money back. They know what they're doing.
or the impact that their stuff is having, I should say. Maybe not what they're doing, but the impact that the exclusivity that they're creating is having.
One area I want to add a little bit of grayness to that's negative is the Infinity Stones. So for those that don't know, when Lego originally came out with the Infinity War wave, they split the Infinity Stones into the 5 sets that came out of that wave. And it was eye rolling at the time. People called them, oh, you just you had to buy every single set. What I never saw anybody mention, and again, N of 1, was that when you got the Infinity Stones, they came with a spool of 4 of them. Probably because it was cheaper for Lego to do that versus clicking one off and, unmolding it, I guess.
So why
Molding
didn't
it
people
into the
just
spool of
sell them on
4
the
and then
secondary market to like fix the problem?
yeah. So they flooded the market. So you could actually, if you wanted the Infinity Gauntlet at the time, you could have bought the Thanos Ultimate Battle. I think it was $80 or $70, and you could have bought the other 4 Infinity Stones because that one came with 2 that you were missing for essentially $5 plus shipping. So, arguably speaking, they actually did kind of make it so that you could get it for less than $100. And I never really saw anybody talk about that. And maybe that wasn't their intent. It honestly probably was just cheaper for them to ship it out that way with 4 of them, and it's maybe a happy little accident, as Bob Ross would say. But it is something I wanted to kind of put, if they were trying to be real bad about this and say, well, actually, I've calculated if we do spend the extra 5 cents to break up all of those per set, I have actually projected our sales will increase by 20%. Therefore, we'll bring home another, $1.7 billion of sales on these sets. Like, somebody could have absolutely made that argument, right? They could have, oh, well, we're actually going to decrease demand because X, Y, Z. So ethically, by not doing something, just like they did not do something to address that Captain Rex exclusivity at the time, or thought of exclusivity, they chose to not do anything, right? They could have if they were trying to be morally bad or morally negative. So just wanted to call that out and introduce that idea.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's really funny because, if the Infinity Stones were what you were after, you could have just taken your excess ones that you got from your set and gone to the local bricks and minifigs and like, so if you could trade them, or whatever for, the other ones. I'm surprised people didn't do that. And again, I wasn't really collecting sets at the time, so and wasn't as into the Lego community as I am now. So maybe people were doing that as a way to get around it. But I guess the point here that you're making is sometimes the demand is, and we've already kind of brought it up, is created by the Lego user groups themselves, not the lugs, but like the Lego community at large. And it is something that the Lego community at large can fix. We just don't do it. So, yes, there we go.
And just to remind everybody while we're on the topic, a year later, I believe, every single one of those Infinity Stones had come out in another set. 2 or 3 years later, at a full gauntlet came with a full suite of Infinity Stones in an advent calendar, I think twice. So they were flooded in that market. So
yeah.
But Wes, let's continue this negative conversation here. Blind bags and randomized minifigures. Let's go. Let's hit it.
Let's do it.
What's a blind bag? Please explain.
Yeah, so you mentioned this kind of already, but blind bags are you don't know what you're going to get. So the best example of this is the older versions of the collectible minifigures, where you went into the store and there was a pile of them, and you bought 4 of them, and you got what you got. That's the blind bag. The example of randomized minifigures might be a very similar case, right? But effectively, you have no control over what the outcome is, and because of the scarcity or the exclusivity of the minifigure itself, you're driven to go buy as many of them as you can in order to get the one minifigure that you want, for example. So yes, that's kind of the blind bag in a nutshell.
Which mimics the idea of like a slot machine, right? Like, I'm gonna spend a penny, pull the lever, and hopefully I get $100. Now,
or like those
the
vending machines, as kids with like the stickers or the little
loot boxes,
gizmo or whatever, and you put 2 quarters into the machine, you slide the thing, and maybe you get the sticker you want, maybe you don't, right? You don't really know.
So, video game loot boxes, or you make a chase minifigure like they did with Series 18 with the police officer, where there's 1 per box, or you go as far as Mr. Gold and say, well, there's actually only 10,000 in the world. Was it 1,000? I don't remember. It was not a lot. Or you go, what was it? Harry Potter Series 1 with the Colin Farrell Colin Farrell from that movie, Griswold or Grindelwald. Griswold's from Christmas Vacation. Anyways, I got ethics on the mind. Now, blind bags are not gambling, and that's why I defined gambling. Gambling you could consider as unethical. Now, where the ethics question arises is if this is mimicking that psychology that gambling hits, or the levers, the dopamine that gambling hits. It's exciting, right? To open up a blind bag minifigure and say, we got a Mr. Gold, like that's
Grinch,
exciting.
I do want to back up though. And is gambling unethical? And
no,
I just
no one's making you do it.
Well, exactly right. And I would argue that it's unethical if.
But would introducing gambling to children be considered ethical if it's addictive in nature knowingly?
Fair enough. And so yes, this is exactly the gray area that we wanted to jump in here, right? And I guess what I'm saying is, as long as whoever it is who's doing the gambling is aware that there's a risk that they will lose their money, and they're more or less, we're not always given odds, right? When do you go to a nickel slot machine in Vegas and they tell you the odds that you're going to make your money back, right? They don't. But
or sometimes they do, and you're just like, meh, it's a nickel.
Right. You're aware, though, that the odds are fairly high that you will not make your money back. So, at the end of the day, that in of itself isn't inherently unethical. But I think what you're getting at is, while something like CMFs or blind bags are not necessarily gambling, I would think you could certainly call it gambling adjacent. And now that you're talking about something that's gambling adjacent in the context of a children's toy and selling things to kids, is that necessarily business environment or that you want to cultivate, right? So
Well, and so that's where it becomes unethical, right? Now, anybody who's thinking about, well, you could feel the blind bags, the boxes are really worse because you can't feel them. No, 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 no. Let's not that. You're overly apologizing for Lego there. Lego has never once said, yeah, hey, these are blind bags, but don't worry, you can feel for an exclusive part to figure out who the minifigure is. Like, the purpose of the blind bag is to drive repeat purchases and purchasing more than you need, and to drive exclusivity and scarcity in the market. That is the only reason you do that. If your goal was to get these collectible minifigures in everybody's hands, you would just say, this is the minifigure in this one. This is the minifigure in that one. Yes, as a community, we found a loophole. Yes, you could go to the Lego store like I did and have them bring you out a brand new box and feel with you and try to find the ones you were looking for too. It became fun. It became a game. I would argue that's still worse because, again, you're
did look a little weird as an
normalizing
adult
gambling.
to be, massaging little Lego poly bags,
Yeah.
but that's neither here nor there.
Yeah. So, yes, going to cardboard boxes did ruin that, but that is not the intention of a blind bag. Period. End of story. Just
and
sorry.
now too, right? The QR code system that they have is, I mean, effectively, I wouldn't say ruins it, but the only time I've seen that backfire, I was at a Lego store in an airport, and they put the price tag over the QR code to scan the minifigure.
Toy stores will do it too, so you can't scan it.
Like, dang it.
Yep.
That felt a little dirty, right? But that's not always the case.
The point of the blind bag's not that, right? So, and again, with the existence of Bricklink, literally nobody says you have to buy or engage in this. You can just wait until somebody opens it for you and just buy the dang thing on Bricklink.
I mean, not to be a Lego stan here, but I mean, I have sometimes gone up to the blind bag system and I'm like, I just want to see what I get. I'm not really bummed if I get multiples. Like, that's not about.
It's fun.
Right. It's sometimes there is fun with the associated with that unknown of like, yeah, I mean, even after being able to feel up to polybags or, kind of becoming proficient at that skill.
Right.
I would still just buy them.
But you're an adult making that decision, right? And you're not, a 9-year-old trying to go get this one minifigure with their allowance.
With $10 of allowance money a week or something, buying 2 CMFs and that's it, right? And yeah.
This is as a strategy and a design, it is meant to be exploitive, right? You are supposed to buy. It is supposed to make you buy more than you need in order to get more money.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then this is where the ethics gets weird because you could argue, well, if they didn't do it this way, it'd be more expensive and then people just would have less minifigures overall, and that'd be sad. But we're not here to debate this verbatim today.
Maybe, right? Maybe. Hard to tell, but
you would only be able to make that argument if you knew if Lego was perhaps losing money by doing it, right? You know what I mean? Like, what's that break even point of how many Lego has to sell in order to balance that out?
Right.
So considerations for why it's not legally, and I said legally gambling, it is because you have a stake, $5 these days. You have a chance. You don't know what you'll get. You are not in control of your outcome. The prize is a potential increase in monetary value. The Chase minifigures are worth more than $5 on the secondary market. And you could technically lose a little bit of money because you could get a figure that's not in high demand that you could maybe only sell for $3, right? But you don't lose your stake altogether. You are guaranteed an item no matter what.
Yeah.
And it will be more than $0. So if I put forward my $5, it's not like I'm going to lose that. They don't have blank boxes out there where it's like, actually, sorry, you just didn't get a minifigure. Suck. That is legally gambling, and that is the difference.
And Grinch, we tolerate this in so many other venues. I already brought up those little vending machines that, I mean, I feel like they're not around as much these days, but they were a staple. It's the claw machine, right? And in that case, you do lose your money. So, that's very much more on the version of gambling. But it's the the little, I mean, the little ball machines, right, that sell, like the Lego minifigure vending machine, right, is the Lego version of those little vending machines that sell the trinket that you want.
Mhm.
Baseball cards, Pokemon cards. How many
Yep.
Pokemon card decks did we open up as kids trying to chase down that holographic Charizard, right? Like, it was
Not a lot because
insane.
our parents wouldn't let us do it, but
Probably for good reason. But point is, to sit there and throw a spirit Lego for this type of thing when this has been going
everybody
on
does
for
it.
decades is again maybe a little unfair. Don't hate the player, hate the game, right? Like, this isn't necessarily something Lego's doing exclusively. They're just doing the Lego version of that. And so if you have an issue with it, it's fair to criticize Lego on it, but this isn't just a Lego only business practice. So, um, yes.
Well, ethically speaking, though, just because everybody else is doing it doesn't mean it's right.
I mean, you're not wrong, Grinch. You're not wrong.
So let's talk about marketing and transparency. So we've talked a little bit about this with the exclusivity of minifigures, the Captain Rex example. I'd argue Lego never said it was exclusive, right? It was implied by the community. We chat about that. The end result is that can be frustrating, right? We've talked about how they split up items and sets, such as the Infinity Stones, to make you have to buy the entire series if you want completion. You don't have to complete it. It's human nature to want to complete it, and that's where the ethics gets brought in because Lego is exploiting that, right? They know, well, hey, people are going to want to complete this more than anything else, so if we just split it up, it'll drive them crazy until they buy them all, right?
Yeah.
Where I would also have some issues would be in stuff like packaging, where you see prints misrepresented. Our dear friend, or he doesn't know we exist, but Jang Bricks on a lot of his reviews brings this up. But where, for example, the Mercy minifigure from Lego Overwatch had a really clear, distinct, deep colored print on the torso. And in reality, it was not skin tone. It was transparent white practically. I mean, like 50% transparent white. It looked terrible. But on the package, they used a computer generated image versus an image of the actual product. That could be a lack of transparency. You could argue that having the minifigures shooting stuff out of their guns in the Lego Star Wars set and this big battle scene in the background, you could argue that that's a lack of transparency because your set doesn't do that, right? But
Mhm.
that is marketing. That's the imagination at play. Seems like people don't have an issue with that. From an ethical standpoint, that's not what the set is, right? So,
Yeah.
do you have any issues with any of the marketing and transparency that maybe I talked about or that you'd like to add?
No, I mean, no issues with. I completely agree. The Another example that I'm thinking of is the Spider-Man Far From Home set that had that windscreen. It was the Stark Jet, and the windscreen had so much of it was printed white on it, and the print was so off color that when you looked at the image, it looked like one cohesive, fuselage because a lot of that was on the windscreen itself. But when you looked at the set as it was that was put together, it was so poorly done that it didn't look like one cohesive thing. It looked very choppy, and it just that felt extraordinarily misrepresentative of the final product. And we've talked through some of the Lego printing challenges, and to their credit, in certain situations, Lego has fixed it. In cases where they've done it right in some markets and done it poorly in others, they will fix it for you. They will give you a new minifigure. But they're not always doing that. And I do think that is unfortunate because it does feel not exploitative, but misrepresentative of the final product. And if, as Jang likes to sort of contest with Lego, if the best is just messed it up again, but if you're shooting for the best every single time, this is not it, right? And so it's
But
unfortunate.
let's let's remember the argument that we've outlaid about the best is only good enough is the purpose of that item is to be a toy. The printing does not necessarily affect its ability to be a toy, which is why this section for us is titled marketing versus transparency versus quality,
Yeah.
right? It's not
Yeah.
a quality issue per se. It's the
I
fact
mean, the
that they're
piece isn't gonna. Yeah.
misrepresenting that
Yeah.
piece and saying, oh, look how seamless it is and it's perfect color match. And this is exactly what you're going to get because it's on the box. And then you open it up and this is not that.
Yeah.
It still
It's not.
functions as intended, however.
Right. It's not any more likely to break and cause an undesired outcome, like a choking hazard or a structural failure in the Lego set because of a misprint. And so, if you look at Lego from like an engineering perspective, they're still meeting this idea that like only the best is good enough because it still functions as desired and required. Again, going back to the example of the cars, plastic interior maybe doesn't look the nicest, but it gets the job done, right? So if you wanted something that wasn't plastic, there's different ways you can pay for it, but that's not really what was here. But to your point, Grinch, right? It's a marketing thing and a transparency thing of what was advertised didn't show the discrepancy. And so when I bought it thinking that I was going to get this whole thing and it was going to look as you portrayed it on the image, which again, Lego is very careful. I don't know if you've noticed this, but when they have sets that they release, for example, like a Star Wars set with clones and battle droids on it, you see exactly what's on there. You might see some explosions, you might see some laser fire, but you don't see other sets in the background. You don't see other minifigures in the background. They do a very careful job of showing, oh, this set has 3 battle droids. There's 3 battle droids on the box, not 4, not 5. There might be some fuzzy things in the background that might look like something, but it's not, you have the very clear example of what you're getting, and then it's sort of a fuzzy background behind it, right? And so they're doing a very clear job of not misrepresenting what you're getting in the box. So Lego is aware of that. So the fact that they do that and then the thing that they produce doesn't meet that standard, I think is frustrating. And I think is a valid criticism of the company.
Mm-hmm. So one of the last things I had is environment. I don't think we need to harp on it too long. I think ultimately, look, Lego, it's plastic, right? But where the ethics come into play is how Lego's addressing that. And they're not just sitting on the sideline being like, whatever, sucks to suck whale, eat my bricks, what they are making conscious efforts and steps as an organization to promote a better world. And you could argue they could do it further and do it more. But from an ethical standpoint, it is obvious that they are making an effort to encourage recycling of bricks, to encourage reuse of bricks, right? To make sure there have zero waste facilities, to optimize their supply chain, to make sure they're not being wasteful in other areas because they have an inherently waste producing product.
In Grinch, I will say this is where I do think Lego, you're absolutely right. This is the production and sale of ABS plastic is not illegal. So what would Lego be doing that's unethical about doing that? Now, you could maybe sit here and say, the production of single-use plastic in this time and in this age we're starting to learn is maybe not the best thing. Surprise, surprise. But again, it's not illegal. So what they're doing is they're taking advantage of a material that meets the needs that they need it to meet. And they're doing so and they're selling it. And that's, entirely clear. Things that I think they could do a better job with are making those recycling programs more widely known, right? Why is there not a bin at every Lego store where it's like, hey, if you have no use for your Lego and the alternative is to throw it away, then just bring it into us and we'll give you 5% off your set or something, right? And I think they could do a better job of, on the box saying, hey, having a little piece in the back of the instruction manual or something, or on the box itself of like, don't throw this away. Send it back to us if you don't want this anymore. And they're not doing that. And I think that would be a more powerful way to sort of, go full circle there. Or say recycle it. It's ABS plastic. It can be recycled. Like throw this in the recycling bin, not the trash, right?
Right.
And I think Lego's not. At the end of the day, right? We don't really want Lego to be recycled so much as we want it to be reused potentially, and or sent to Lego to internally recycle it. But if the alternative is a landfill or a recycling bin, I think all of us can agree we would prefer the Lego to go into a recycling bin. As much as maybe as Lego fans that hurts us to say, but Lego could say that, and I don't think that would be wrong. And I think maybe that's where, in sort of the context of like, you are contributing to the single-use plastic problem to some extent, this is maybe something you could do responsibly to help with that, is where they're falling short. But
Well, and even the form, right, of plastic. Like let's pretend for a moment Lego was a wood toy. They created wooden bricks somehow. I don't know. Let's just say they did it.
but yes,
The deforestation that would occur, the waste of water to produce and cut the wood down to that, right? I mean, would be immense. And certainly there's been no study on the impact of how much weight in plastic Lego uses a year and what the equivalent would be in wood, but there's not necessarily a better way to produce it, let alone to mention the cost would be insane. And
well,
if it were rare, if it were earth metals, right? Like if it was steel, like steel bricks would be ridiculously expensive.
do you remember, Grinch, when we were children, how much of a big push there was to do things like recycle paper? And there was like a huge push to go away from like paper bags at the grocery store because, well, that's a paper product, and that's like a one-time thing, and it's so wasteful. Like you're cutting down a tree to make this paper product, and you're like, yeah, but I can replant a tree, and this is biodegradable. This paper is, right? The plastic grocery bag is not biodegradable. So
Right.
it's funny how we sort of have come full circle on these things. Of now, if I get a choice, I usually use recycled, grocery bags or reusable grocery bags. But if I have a choice between paper and plastic, and I'm not prepared, I'll choose paper because I know that paper is actually, even though its creation requires you cutting down a tree, it's not plastic, right? And so the irony of all this discussion is we come full circle on all of this stuff sometimes, and so. Um, I guess again, right? Like this discussion about Lego is you can have a nuanced discussion about being a toy plastic company. There's no material that works for this other than plastic. The demand is high enough that like Lego's not just going to stop making plastic toys out of the goodness of their hearts for the environment. If they're not doing it, somebody else is going to do it.
Well,
So
you brought up reusable tote bags. I mean, that's what my wife and I use at the grocery store, but they've done a study that says you have to, one tote bag produces the equivalent waste of 17,000 plastic grocery bags.
yeah,
So if you're replacing your reusable tote bags every year, you're having a more negative impact on the environment. It's almost like a plastic Christmas tree, right? People say, oh, well, you're not cutting down a Christmas tree. But you have to have that tree for 40 years before there's a net benefit to the environment versus cutting down a real tree. 40 years. So if you're
When
getting a new
that's-
Christmas tree every 2 years, artificial one, or every 5 years, or hell, even every 7 years, you are having a way worse effect on the environment than just cutting down a Christmas tree.
and that's where you're bringing up a really interesting, concept too, which is, yes, if you're using like some of those hard plastic, or not hard plastic, but heavier plastic reusable bags, the ones you get from like TJ Maxx or something, like, yeah, that's just more plastic. That's not really solving the
Yep.
problem. It's using the materials like cotton, wool, jute. Those are the things that are truly renewable and reusable because they're not made of plastic. They're naturally occurring materials that have been repurposed for the creation of a bag, for example. And so again, the nuance, and there's devil in the details. So but long story short, right? I don't think we can ignore the fact that Lego is ultimately pumping out more single-use plastic. I would be curious to see how they stack up as a corporation of like who makes the most plastic, single-use plastic every year. I'm sure the bottling companies that do your Aquafina and Dasani bottles, your bottled water or whatever.
So Pepsi and Coke.
Well, yes. I mean, I don't think they actually create their own bottles, right? But whoever it is who supplies the bottle for them. I mean, you go to the grocery store and like everything's covered in plastic these days. It's kind of disappointing. But
yeah,
the point is, right? Like they still have a role to play in this. And they're not, innocent's not the right word, right? But like they are contributing to this problem of plastic in the world. At the same time, there's things that they're doing that help mitigate it, offset it. And we've already spoken to that in the positive side of things. But, again, alternatively, like, great. So you stop buying Lego because of their environmental impact. Fair. Did you not buy a car because there's a lot of plastic in cars? Are you not buying food from the grocery store? Are you not like, it's almost inescapable these days. So if you're going to fault Lego for this, I hope you're faulting everyone else as well, because Lego is just one of many companies that sells plastic products. So,
well, I think it's clear there's a lot of nuance here. So I've got one last point I want to make before we wrap up the conversation. And West, we've talked a lot on this podcast about how the price of Lego's changing, Lego's producing more large sets, etc. We've talked about their portfolio, how it's skewing towards the adult collector. And I think a question I have for you is that fostering an environment where Lego can reach their mission, which is encouraging the builders of tomorrow. Now, again, we talked earlier, it's subjective. We assume they mean little ones. That could be an adult, a builder of tomorrow, right? It could just be a builder of tomorrow. But if Lego's goal is, really surrounding, right, with the core values, their mission, right, around making sure that play through education is this widely available thing for children. Just having these high $600 collectible sets on the market, and when your only option is a brickhead, for example, does that reach that goal? Does leaning in with IPs like The Simpsons and Star Wars, and by the way, while it's really well known, we didn't really talk about Lego's own morals and the fact that they won't create military vehicles that are realistic, right? But they will do fantasy because it's fantasy. So this is, that's a very well-known argument, which is why we didn't really want to touch on it today. But it's certainly worth bringing up as we kind of gear up the end of this conversation. Do you feel Lego is reaching that goal by having these helmets, these 18 plus sets, etc., on the market?
Grinch, I'm going to be a Lego apologist for this, because I think they are, because the builder of tomorrow could be 80 years old today. And building and being creative doesn't have an age limit. And I think all too often, you earlier you had mentioned like, well, kids play with these. And as an adult, like we kind of said, like adults play with them too, right? Like we as adults, I don't know at what age it is. I think it's somewhere in late adolescence, early teenage years. Just, it seems like that side of our brains where we're creative gets shut down out of a fear for being found out that we're using our imaginations, or self-doubt or criticism. And I think this is one of the most important roles that Lego can do. And I really love, today in 2026, you can go around and talk to adults all over the world, and you can mention Lego and you can say, I built Lego, and you can do so without feeling kind of like ashamed or embarrassed. But like 10 years ago, 20 years ago, you were kind of chastised as like, it was kind of a childish thing. And I think, a really good example of this was when Star Wars was coming out again, and they were interviewing people excited to go see the new Star Wars movies, which, man, rip. But anyways, and people, they're like, everyone's a Star Wars fan, whether you admit to it or not. Like people love Star Wars, and it was suddenly cool again to like things like that, and and I think we're living in this magical age where like being nerdy, look at like Stranger Things and the impact it's had on society, right? like people, these celebrities are coming out and they're like, yeah, we play Dungeons and Dragons all the time. Like this is something we love to do, these actors and stuff. And you're like, like eh, you have this
But
like,
you're cool.
right. And so I think companies like Lego have done a huge job, and I've played a huge role in sort of democratizing that and making people feel comfortable with saying and sharing that. And I think that's just so hugely important. And so while yes, when we hear the mission is to, encourage the builders of tomorrow, we think children. I also don't think it's limited to children. I think it's adults. And so if the icons line, if the helmets, if the fish tanks of the world, the botanicals of the world are doing that, then I think that's a wonderful thing for Lego. So I'm all in on that, and that's where I stand.
So it's a nuanced conversation. And that's where and why we started the conversation with, look, we're not going to sit here and just try to make a point. We will have some facts. We will have our opinions be known, but ultimately it's going to be up to the listener. And if this is not our longest podcast to date, then I mean, it's going to be the longest episode we've ever released because of this. So let's wrap up some of these thoughts. So from a legal and business perspective, right? From a business perspective, Lego's goal is to make money. So you can argue as long as they're doing that in a legal way, they're ethical. And that's well accepted by society that a business's purpose is to make money. So Lego's anti-consumer friendly, again, not anti-consumer just overall, but anti-consumer friendly practices are not inherently unethical because, again, the goal of Lego is to make money. And Lego
And as we just
almost went out of business in 2000. And I think 99% of the listeners listening or people in the world say it's good that they did it.
yeah, absolutely. And I also wanted to add that those practices that you mentioned aren't exclusive to Lego. So that's an important
Correct.
thing too.
The ethicality, is that a word? Question comes from when you're evaluating Lego against its stated value and missions, right? That's where you can start to argue, well, if Lego's purpose is child development, accessibility, and fun, having things inaccessible through exclusivity is not an ethical way to meet that goal, right? Because then it's focusing more on the profit aspect than their actual mission, right? And that's not necessarily fair to consumers. First, and creating false expectations, right? But I think we chatted through that enough. From that perspective, you could see some of these practices as being ethically tensioned, is how I'd like to define it, based off that kind of anti-consumer friendly basis, right? Based off of that idea that those practices don't necessarily meet Lego's inherent goals. But again, Lego also cannot meet those goals if they go out of business. So there is a very fine balance of being a business, staying in business, creating profit, and being able to meet the goal that you're setting out to meet. So I would like to summarize it. West, I'll let you summarize here in a minute, is Lego is legally and mostly ethically strong, but certainly certain marketing and collector focuses strategies create tension between profit, consumer fairness, where I think this question of Lego's ethical standpoint comes into play. Yeah. I would like to also argue that you do not become the number one most reputable company in the world 5 out of the last 6 years by not being ethical. West, what's your closing thoughts before we move on to our Rick mail?
Oh man, Grinch. Well, I don't know if I can top that summary there. I would just say that it's fair to not always maybe appreciate or see eye to eye with the way that Lego's doing things, but I'd say any instance where you're sitting there and saying, well, this isn't fair or this is unethical or this isn't, see if you can find other examples of that thing occurring in other industries and other toy companies. And then ask yourself, Is this something that Lego is doing exclusively, or is it a widely accepted practice? Because if it's a widely accepted practice, I don't think it's necessarily valid to place the blame on Lego. You can still be frustrated. I'm not saying people's feelings about the matter are invalid, right? But we have to be, fair brokers. And if you're frustrated at Lego for the blind bag thing, then you need to be frustrated at Pokemon for the blind bag version of their Pokemon cards, or Magic the Gathering, or baseball cards, or whatever else there is out there. If you're frustrated at the
Heck, a gumball
exclusivity of
machine at
things.
the mall because you wanted blueberry and you spun it and you got cherry.
Right, exactly, right? I mean, it's a very silly way to think about it, but you have to take it to the logical extreme and sit there and say, like, is this actually something that Lego is doing, or is this something that's just unfortunate, byproduct of the world we live in? And I think that's important to look at that. And so again, we're not apologizing for Lego. We're not trying to be Lego stans here. I think we're just trying to make sure that we approach this from a objective viewpoint and understand things completely.
Why don't we transition over to our brick mail?
Let's do it.
Brick mail.
Well, Grinch, our brick mail this week comes from Rebecca, who writes in, "Hi, Grinch and West. By all accounts, I'm a fairly new Lego fan. I wasn't gifted Lego as a child, although my brother enjoyed the occasional Star Wars and Bionicle set. I didn't purchase sets for myself until a couple of years ago, well into adulthood. Since then, I've amassed a decent collection with some highlights I've really enjoyed. Diagon Alley, Hogwarts Icons, the A-Frame Cabin, Home Alone House, Tudor Corner, Medieval Blacksmith, to name a few. I enjoy the upscaled minifig builds, the occasional botanical set, the Lego City food trucks, and like West, I'm sometimes a Duplo customer when my nephew is in need of a Lightning McQueen. Like a true AFOL, there's not much in the Lego world I don't love. I'm quickly learning both how to cultivate my collection and how to creatively engage in the hobby, hence my stumbling upon and listening to your podcast. A couple of thoughts. Would you ever consider doing an episode in which you compiled a working list of your favorite, most beloved Lego resources? Social media accounts to follow, websites to visit, pages to consult for certain information. For a fairly new Lego fan who enjoys reading, learning as part of the hobby, I'd love to hear more about the Lego content you guys consume, when you're not building or creating fabulous content for us. I can't remember the exact episode in which you addressed this offhandedly. I believe it's one of the holiday buying guides, but the Lego.com price brackets are, well, fairly unproductive. The $100 plus is quite a hefty price tier nowadays. And with the number of sets falling in there, it doesn't exactly serve as an efficient filter. I admit the following system or thought process is far from scientific, but in practice, I find myself seeking out sets based on these rough numbers. The under $30 set you pick up at Target and Walmart with no real thought, the not too damaging impulse buy under $100, the $150 to $220 set, give or take, and the heavily forethought $300 plus set. Grinch, your one Lego set a month system has worked well for me, and when I consider spending capacity, the above brackets feel like my metric, in part because after building a number of sets, there's a feeling associated with building that $30, $100, or $300 set. They're different experiences that feel or should feel comparable to the cost. Not necessarily a bad thing. I love a great $30 build after a long workday, and I love the accomplishment of finishing or displaying a $300 set. Obviously, I just work to avoid paying $175 for something that feels like a $100 build. My goal is at the end of each build to feel like the building experience matched the cost. So my question is this: what are your current on-the-shelf recommendations in these brackets? Or stated slightly different, with an allotted $30, $100, $200, $300 price expense, or price range, which set are you selecting as the best bang for your buck in those tiers? Please keep putting out great content. It brings a lot of excitement to Monday morning commutes for a tired teacher. Best, Rebecca.
Well, there's a lot to unpack there. So, Wes, why don't we go through and just kind of respond to both respond to each one of those items, and we'll kind of go down the list one after another with the response to each kind of tier from both of us. I just first of all I want to say like your shout outs on your favorite sets there. Definitely some good sets. I think I have all of them, but the A-Frame and the Home Alone, which is what makes this podcast so magical because West has those sets. So between the two of us, we've got a wide diversity and range of sets that we like to cover. So your question on number one, would you ever consider doing an episode in which you compile a list of your favorites? I think that was part of our intention with this podcast in general was, you know, a list is only so deep, right? And we wanted to be this source for AFOL of, I want to learn about sorting and storing. So we brought on Tom Alphin because that's where I was incredibly inspired as an AFOL about, on my own sorting and storing journey with his part guides and labels. So one thing that West and I do is, or I should say that West does is after every episode, if there's links of inspiration or specific things that we mention, they go onto our link tree on our Instagram. So essentially, that repository of links and information exist on an episode by episode basis where applicable. On a, for example, we don't like the Arctic episode we did. We don't necessarily go and link brick set and Brickopedia and Lego.com for Arctic sets. We just kind of talk about that, but yeah, so on the sorting and storing example, we linked the brick architect. So I think the episode that you're kind of mentioning would look more like what are the resources out there as a collective of maybe we could just run through them. So I think Wes and I can certainly think about that, and if we can kind of put an episode together on that topic. We love when our listeners recommend episodes because it's something that you all want to hear. And just this episode today was a recommended one. So I think we'll certainly noodle on that and see kind of what we can come up with, and if there's an episode there that we can cover.
Yeah, and actually, this reminds me, or has inspired me. Maybe we need to adjust our link tree. Maybe instead of doing an episode by episode link tree, we actually make it so that it's, the sections are, hey, here's everything we've ever talked about Lego trains. Here's everything about Lego color. And sometimes that's episode by episode, but sometimes we do stumble upon stuff later on that then kind of feeds into those other categories. So we could explore reorganizing that too. But as Grinch said, that was sort of the initial impetus for the link tree, was to create this repository for Lego resources for the AFOL who's interested in things like the scale of a minifigure and how that plays out. And Tom Alphin has a really great guide on that as well, in addition to his discussion on sorting. Or the Washington Post had a really wonderful article that came out, I believe, just last year about the history of color in Lego. And so we're trying to kind of connect those pieces. And as Grinch mentioned, right, they're not necessarily links to the Lego website, but it is ideally links to more. And we do actually include even a section of builders who we really like to follow. But we have that's sort of the intent of the link tree. So I would encourage you to start there. But if there's something that's missing or something you think should go into the link tree, let us know and we'd be happy to add it.
Yeah, maybe we keep the episode by episode and just add a general resources of just some heavy hitters, right? So there's a nice,
Absolutely,
clear area of like, hey, get started. And we've been flirting with this idea of a Discord for a while, so maybe this is more fuel to the Discord fire.
definitely.
If you want to moderate a Discord channel, please reach out. Number two, the holiday buying guide with the price tiers. Yeah, so that was that episode, and yeah, I mean, you're quite right. It's tough, right? Was it like 0 to 15, 15 to like 30, 30 to 50, 50 to $75, and then it's like 100 plus, and you're like, okay, so half of these sets are in one of these tiers and half of them aren't. So I like the tiers that you set on there. And then yeah, so my one Lego set a month system, to clarify for listeners that maybe didn't listen to the episode where I've talked about it or forgotten. My budget for Lego is I do $350 a month, and then I will allow myself one set over $350. So it's any number of sets up to $350 or one $350 or more, because we all are painfully aware as Lego builders that you just, there's going to be sets over that range, right? So the exception is the one set over that. And that's kind of how I've derived my Lego budget from. So that way you can kind of still feel like you're collecting enough and be able to get the exact set you want. It kind of makes you plan it out a little bit more versus just having this untapped amount of money. Whether or not you can afford that, it's not a sustainable way to engage in the hobby, right? Because you start to make when you're making excuses to buy a set, right? Well, oh well, that new aquarium, $500, it comes with a lot of really cool recolors and some opalescent transparent pieces. I really want to get those. Well, now it's like, well, I can get that or I can get black pearl.
Yeah.
You're like, well, I want black pearl. Like, I want black pearl. I don't want the aquarium. I'm just making an excuse to spend $500 on Lego. You end up regretting that you bought it. They put those pieces on Pick a Brick in the month of March of 2026, and you can buy them for 14 cents on there. So I'm really glad
I
that's
like
working out for you.
the context for that Grinch, because that's the solution to that. I think as AFOLs, we've all been there where we found ourselves buying things just to buy things. And this is sort of your way to back up from that. And I appreciate that. And yeah, if the $350 price threshold that Grinch is spending is maybe not, within your price range, make it $200, make it $100, right? Like you can do whatever you want, but the point
And
is this
if it's
idea.
more than if your price range could be more, Wes, I have a daughter in daycare. Before she was in I mean, it's $2,000 a month. Before she was in daycare, I was not so I have that money, right, on a monthly basis.
Mhm.
Before this, I was not spending that on Lego though, because I didn't need to. You need to set a rule. You have to.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you just buy crap, right? And that's not why you're engaging with this hobby. And if that's what you're trying to do, go buy stock and invest in the stock market and get into stock investing, because that's literally the point of it.
Yeah, I would say exactly that, right? Which is the rule is in place to help, like we talked about, corral the hobby, not necessarily to encourage it. And so, on my end, it's the constant moving right now that has me basically. I'm not buying stuff because I'm like I don't want to pack this away, right? So, we all have these reasons, and this is just something you can create artificially to help you with that.
Mhm. So the question on current on-shelf recommendations in those brackets were slightly different. So I was going to take it a little more broad. I think we can follow up, like Wes mentioned, on our Brick Rancher next week. Um, I liked your tiers, and I would just say, kind of to my last point though, is I'm not necessarily going and looking and saying, okay, which set over $300 do I want to buy? Where I'm doing it is I'm saying, this is a set I want. Add it to my wish list. I want, and I'll do this as an example, I want the Pikachu and Eevee. Add those to my wish list. And then what I'm doing on a monthly basis is I'm saying, there's this set that I want. Oh, it's over $350. That's the only set I'm going to buy that month. Or I can buy these 6 Marvel sets and go up to that 350 tier. And those are the sets I'm going to buy. And I leave it at that. So I don't necessarily go tier by tier and determine, oh, I'm going to get that set in that tier, that set in that tier. I just highlight the sets that I want and then look at it on the tiers of like, okay, so that means I can buy all of these 6 sets, or I can just buy that one set.
Yep.
So thinking about it and inversing 2 of the steps there, right? Versus looking at the tier and then determining the set. I'm looking at the sets, determining the tier and the budget, and then saying, okay, so this cool new Lord of the Rings set that's plus $500, Barad-dûr, that came out, like that's going to be the only set I buy that month, and I'm going to buy it because I want it. Versus, well, I've got $350 to spend or one set. Now, where I challenge you is it's okay to change though, right? Because Lego changes too. I want to engage with Lego as a hobby. I have no problem right now looking at the catalog and saying, I want this set, I want this set, I want this set, I want this set. I've not come to the point where I'm like, man, there's just nothing. What do I want? I don't really want any of these things. There's always something that I want, right? And I think most AFOLs live in this world of there's always something that we want.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's totally fair.
But West and I owe you our follow up during Brick Banter next week. Thank you for writing in, Rebecca. Thank you for being a teacher.
Yes.
And sorry that you're so tired. I hope you enjoy your next cup of coffee listening to this show. Really, really sincerely hope you enjoy that. So, and that is a wrap of another episode of AFOLs Welcome. If you've enjoyed this podcast, please subscribe and leave us a review on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, or wherever you are listening to this show. If you would like to write the podcast, please email us at afolswelcome@gmail.com or follow us on Instagram at AFOLs Welcome. Thank you for listening, and we will catch you on the next one.